Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Area Control Bros, where we talk about old 4X games mostly.
Mostly.
Mostly, let's go.
Um, the 4X game of this week, as mentioned at the end of last week's episode, if you made it there, congratulations, and also I'm sorry, um, is Runewars, which is an out-of-print FFG game from the early 2010s. In fact, about as early in the 2010s as you can be because it was 2010 and the revised edition was 2012. There is also an out of print expansion. I do not have the expansion. We will not be talking about the expansion today.
It was enough content for me as it was. I did not feel the need for an expansion.
That is true. If anything, perhaps a reduction would be in order.
Sometimes an expansion can be a reduction, Sometimes they're smart enough to do that. Not usually, but sometimes.
Right. Well, this is a early Corey design. So Corey Connexa, as many people know him for working on the TI3 expansions, TI5, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars Rebellion. He's got a really he's kind of was the all-star designer at FFG. I think he started working there, I want to say 2006 or 2007. So this is probably one of his early designs that he did, like not by himself, because there were many people at FFG that would have been playing this with him and testing it, but probably one of his earlier like solo designs there. Um, this game technically re-implements an older game called Battle Mist, True discovered, but we have not played that. It's some ancient relic of FFG history from '98. So I don't know to what extent it's a re-implementation of some of those mechanics and to what extent it is Corey's contributions. However, you can definitely tell that this has a lot of TI3 DNA in it, a lot of elements of sort of the FFG games of the era. And with some of the rules, you can even sort of feel the ripples of them into later games with how units can be routed and a sort of end of battle tallying of strength to determine who has to retreat and that kind of thing. This will show up in later FPG titles and I'm sure in a few earlier titles as well. So if you're coming from those games to this game, some mechanics will feel familiar. However, there will be many that will not feel familiar at all.
That's true. A lot of unique stuff about this game, which I think is always exciting. There's always going to be enough similar about 4X games or area control games just by virtue of them being 4X and area control games. So when you can give me something a little bit more to chew on with a design, then that's fun for me.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. So this is definitely a full-blown 4X game when you play with all of the kind of elements. There is an optional thing you can add in the rules with exploration that the heroes can do. They can like go into dungeons. I personally think that that addition might be too much, uh, but if you choose to, that's kind of the exploration element. Otherwise, it's mostly the other three X's and it's mostly expanding and exterminating. So it's mostly two X's, but it does technically have all four.
You can exploit a little bit with the harvest is weird because you're not really like spending the resources. It's almost like you're checking that you have like what your resources are. Like you can just like not look at your, harvest portfolio and not realize the loss
Mm,
for a while. Like because like the way that it works is when you take the harvest action, you put all of your dials to where they will be for the tiles that you control. And then until something tells you to like reset your dials, you don't really like you could lose everything and you still have those resources for some of the other actions like
yeah.
recruiting. Um, and then like there's some ways that you can spend those resources and thus why you'd want to like put them back up. But a little bit different, a little bit strange in how that works. You're not really like gathering the resources. It's just like you kind of have them.
Yeah. And not very many things make you spend the resources. Most things just check where your resource dials are at. And occasionally there'll be, a action card that you can make your opponent, lose something on their dial, or there'll be one of the seasonal events that will, make the something happen with the dials, be it losing, or, there's like forced harvests, or there's cards that make it so that you can't harvest at all for that particular round, that sort of thing. So they play with it with a number of mechanics throughout the game. But yeah, it truly is weird when you're coming from, a background of playing other 4X, style games where you're used to, well, I really need to hold this tile. And if I don't, I will immediately feel that as a loss of resources, or maybe with something like TI where you flip your planets as you use them. Um, it might be that that's a bigger target for your opponents until you flip those resources, or you're more keen on using planets that are more likely to be lost, this sort of thing. And you have these little boxes that you're checking mentally as you go through. Well, what should I do on my turn? In this game, I feel like most of the time you don't have to worry about like temporarily losing a tile. You're going to keep the resources in that moment. It's not going to affect you right out the gate.
Yeah, and the resources are mostly just used to get units. I guess there are like other actions that care about it where you can get influence or cards based on like where your dials are at.
Yeah.
But mostly I care about it for how much units I'm gonna get like on the board for the expanding and exterminating. Um, and then the only other exploit kind of thing is like the cities, which is
Mm.
like there's one of the actions is tied to like if you have cities, you get to do cool stuff and get stuff
Well,
from the cities.
also building strongholds in the developments that you can attach to them a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, you can upgrade your strongholds so that they like provide more. And that is tied to harvesting. So
Yes, yeah.
yeah, I guess we should mention that this kind of has like a TI sort of like strategy cards. It's more similar to Last Light as we discussed. Like you have 8 things that you can do. Everybody decides one of the things that they're doing as simultaneously, and then you all like resolve those in initiative order. And that's kind of the core of the game. Is like,
It's identical to Last Light, except for the
yeah,
supremacy bonus, actually. Like it's the same thing totally. Um, I do think, and we talked about this when we were all playing together, that I think that us having played Last Light, and then I played this before Last Light came out, obviously. But then playing Last Light and coming back to this game, I like Last Light's implementation of the system better, which makes sense. It's a game that was developed
yeah,
a decade later, more than a decade later. And part of that is that in this game, it incentivizes you to play your lower numbered card, your lower initiative cards first to get a special bonus, because you receive the bonus for the card if it's the highest number that you've played thus far in the year of the game, which is 4 seasons. And so it kind of lends to the game having every year being a little too similar, because it's like I want to do my moving in spring, I want to do my harvesting, later, and then in winter I'm gonna bunker up and build things or fortify, get more power. And on one hand, that's really thematic, and this game is definitely succeeding at creating like a thematic 4X. Like there's a lot of
Right.
things that in this game that like are like thematic wins. And I like the idea that spring the weather's good, so we're marching around, and in winter the weather's bad, so we're hunkering down and just, in our fortresses. That makes sense, but in terms of how the gameplay plays out, it does kind of feel like your options are more limited than it may seem with a hand of 8 cards. And I
Yes.
don't I don't love that.
yeah,
And
because
especially so
yeah,
because a lot of the seasonal events will further limit you, you
Yeah,
know, be
true.
it by maybe disallowing harvest as an action during a particular turn, or we had, the long winter card come out on one of the spring tiles, which prevents you from picking up as many of your your action cards, and then you feel more limited for 4 rounds,
Yeah,
this
that's
sort of
brutal.
thing. Um, there's all sorts of stuff like that can happen.
Yeah. I was gonna say, really, like if you break it down, like most seasons, it's like, am I doing one or two in spring? Am I doing three or four
Yeah,
in
that's
summer? Am I doing five or six in fall? And then am I doing seven or eight in winter? If you want to, if you're like really focused on the supremacy bonuses, and like you can mess around with it a little bit, like, but. I don't know. Mostly you're doing like a similar thing every turn. Also because movement is very limited. Um, like you are kind of capped. You're capped at doing two combats a year. Like there's no possible way for you to do more than two combats in a year.
yes.
Um, because like it's
Well,
There might be
you can't
action cards that
you
let you
can't.
like pick up a tile or something.
maybe
That's
yeah
true. There
there
is
is.
something that lets you pick up an activation token, but I think even if you did that, you'd still be limited to two, right? Because what you need to
No,
get
no,
back is the
Ben had an action card that let you and him
take a
pick up
card back.
one of your
Yeah.
cards. And
Oh
so
yeah,
then if
yeah,
you had
yeah,
a
yeah,
third
yeah, yeah.
army that wasn't
Yes.
locked down, or maybe you combo it with the action card that lets you remove an activation token and you use the same army. But
Yes. Yeah, that
it's
that
it's
is right.
it's very, very rare that you're going to have more than two battles. And probably you're going to have we should say that you'll initiate more than two battles. You can certainly have more than two because someone else might come after you, but it's
Yeah.
very rare that you're going to initiate more than two. And even at that, I think that most of the time you probably won't want to initiate two. Maybe towards the end of the game when you really got a nice forward position, but I think a lot of the time you're just looking to build up some guys or to, further develop your strongholds, this sort of thing,
Hmm.
Um,
which is okay. You know, there isn't
yeah.
anything inherently wrong with that.
I think the game shows its age a little bit. I think there's a lot of like cool ideas here, but I do think that there's a lot of them that are a lot of these ideas that have been explored better in other games. I guess is my big thing with Rune Wars. Like we said, like the whole core of the like action system where you're deciding what cards you're gonna pick together. Like I really like how Last Light implements that. And this is not a short game. I don't know how much shorter we could shave the playtime off of it, but it took like 5 hours.
I think
And with
the only way to shorten it would be actually trying to like full on eliminate the other players, I think. Like
yeah,
actually
I,
just
I
go for
think
the
you might
kill.
get down to four if you really, really knew the rules because we did have a decent amount of referencing, but yeah, I mean, it's a
This was
long game. There's no denying.
this was my third play, and I still had to look up quite a few things, mostly to do with heroes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it's this is a long game. I mean you can play Last Light 2 to 3 times in
yeah.
the course of this game, on the side table. But yeah,
It does occupy a unique niche, which we should talk about, which is that it is a fantasy 4X, and there's not
Oh,
a
yeah,
ton
yeah.
of those.
True.
Last Light has that going against it, where Space 4X is like,
a dime a dozen.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's so many
Yeah.
Space 4X, not as many Fantasy 4X,
I
kind of.
think it works for Last Light because it markets itself as this is the 4X you already know and love, but it's quick, right? And so not
Mhm.
changing the theme and going against the grain, I think is okay for Last Light and doesn't hurt it in any way, in my opinion. But
I think
I would say that's a plus here, and it does a good job of it. You got your little dragons on the board, you got your giants, you got your hellhounds or whatever they're called, and it's fun to go around and get them. And I do think one of the really cool bits of this game, sort of reminiscent of Dwellings, I guess, is that you can capture these neutral enemies and make them a part of your squad, which is exciting, and it's kind of like, ooh, like Will got the dragon or Ben's like going to try to capture the giants, what are we gonna do? Um, Now the system by which you get them can be very swingy. You might spend, um, let's say you decide to spend 5 influence because you can choose how much of your influence tokens you want to spend getting deeper into the deck looking for a card that will allow you to capture these neutral units. you might not get it even if you spend five, which is a pretty hefty sum. You might not get it even if you spend eight, which is a pretty hefty sum,
You
you
can't even
know?
spend it. You can only spend six at
Okay, well, you
max.
max out at the
So
six,
it's
yeah. But
yeah,
you
But
might
even
not get it even when you do that. And then
but
it's
I
yeah,
like,
mean,
well, I'm out
spending
six
six and
and
not getting it is pretty bad. I mean, because it'll be,
yeah.
I mean, influence is important. Although I think now that you brought it up, like I think we should talk about what the core of the game is, which is
Mm,
the deck of cards. This game it was developed during the period of like trying to move away from dice, although of course they moved back to dice for TI4, and they still use dice for Arkham Horror. But this game tried to go diceless, but instead of using dice, they perhaps created a system that was worse than the problem in the first place. By so each card has four different areas, each referring to one of the different classes in combat, which can also refer to the heroes, which are a circle class. And also at the top of each card, there's a little symbol that can be used to resolve quests. And as Blake was mentioning, the diplomacy with the neutrals. We all agree that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this easily could have been done with just rolling like four different types of dice. And
yeah.
we all thought about Uprising because Uprising is a game that comes to mind with this because it is kind of the other Fantasy 4X that we played, and we played Uprising a lot. Um, and the way they kind of solved this is to have many different types of dice that have different distributions. And for those of you that have played Arcs, it's when there's the three different dice in arcs. It's like that kind of thing where different, although it's a little different from arcs where you're not deciding which to
Right.
roll.
It's
It's more
not
like
like lame or anything, you
yeah,
know?
it doesn't suck like arcs. It's more like this class, these guys are the defenders, so they roll the blue dice, which are kind of the dice that
Right.
are more prone to rolling shields. And this game would have benefited from, I think, that more than having this deck that you're constantly having to draw from and reshuffle and reach over the table. And like it's this one deck that runs the whole game. It's used for questing, it's used for dueling, it's used for checking certain events to see how they if they go your way or not. It's used for combat. It's just like it's the core of the game. And I think it just would have been way easier to do this a different way.
yeah. No, I also the problem I have with the deck of cards is that and I don't think this is the design intention, but it feels like the way that I would get better at this game is by trying to count the cards like it's blackjack. Like the way that you could like tangibly become more skilled at this game is by memorizing every card in the deck and then figuring out what has already been played and then trying to figure
Right.
out the distribution of what's left and whether or not the combat that you're going to engage in is going to be good for triangles or something, which
Yeah.
sounds maddening and also I like the statistics, like if you're statistic brained, is just much easier and much more thought of if it's just dice distributions. Like you can look at a dice and be like, okay, this one's got like some like the X amount of blanks. The six-sided dice has three blanks on it. So it's not going to be very good at hitting, you know?
Yeah.
But no
Harder
fucking
to tell with a
idea.
deck.
Yeah.
We went through the whole game. I still don't know the relative like strength level of the different units and how likely they are to hit. I don't even really have a good idea of it, because you're worried about so many other things, partly.
Well,
And Ben, I want to comment on that where you said you don't think that it's the design intention to try to get you to memorize the decks. Part of me feels like it is because they have like a set phase in, I believe, the fall where it's like, oh, and now we reshuffle that deck and get to randomize it again. Like why I don't know. There's an amount of
Yeah.
like this deck system isn't doing what I think they want it to do. It's supposed to simplify and hell, maybe it was good for cutting costs back on what you would otherwise be producing like a bunch of dice,
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, but that's not a great argument in my mind because this is a game that already has a lot of plastic and what, you add $5 to the price tag or something, or
yeah, I
is it
mean,
really going to hurt sales?
at this point, why not? Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if they can make a mini for each of the different heroes of the game, which by the way is a great touch, it's really nice. They could definitely have, made special dice.
Just
I think so.
Imagine for a second, though, that we are playing a game in which everyone is taking it that seriously, where everyone has tried to memorize the deck and is like counting
Oh
cards,
yeah,
how much
insufferable.
longer it would take. You
Yeah,
know? Like,
I don't want to live in that timeline.
right,
no.
right.
Like,
But I mean, those complaints aside about the deck, right? Because I do think it would be better just as dice. I think that's fair. We do all agree on that. Is it that bad? No, it's not like the end of the world. There's some frustrations with it, but ultimately, as a resolution system, does it work? Yes. That's not the thing that for me is really bogging down the game. You know,
I
I think
agree.
there are other mechanisms here that are more frustrating to deal with than that.
I just thought it was a good time to bring it up because I think it is something to talk about with this game.
Absolutely, especially since yeah, it is, you're always reaching for that deck. No
You're
matter
always
what
reaching
part of
for
the
it.
game you're interacting with, you're always reaching
Yep.
for that deck, you
Mhm.
know. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I do think it's relevant. What we talked about the different there's three different resource styles and those have those, symbols on it. We talked about that. And we haven't talked too much about influence. I think we ought to talk about influence and use that as a jumping off point to talk about how confusing player turn order can be,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I will influence like as a system I like. I think we all like auctions and bidding, and so
Mhm.
when we'll get hyped up, it's like, oh, we have an excuse to do like an auction mini game. Let's go.
Yeah,
But and this game has a lot of forced auctions or where you're all doing a blind bid, which is, just like put your closed fist on the table,
yeah.
reveal, and
And it can really matter who wins, and
it
that's
can matter.
fun,
And that's
and
fun.
and
Yeah,
and then
these
you start having to think
Yeah.
about, oh, I'll maybe get some influence instead of like an action card that might help me with combat because I want to do better in the bidding. The trade-off is even fun to think about.
I like it better than the TI4 agenda phase. Like
yes,
I would
yes.
much rather like we do like a fucking bid with votes in TI and get it fucking over with because that
Oh my
always drags on
gosh.
so long and doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah,
this
that
is
would be
it,
that would be
it
really interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a similar level of like importance as well. Like some of the quote unquote agendas or season cards in this game are like a similar level of importance as the stuff in TI, where it's like sometimes it's like, oh, it's worth a victory point, and sometimes it's like a marginal bonus or
Mhm.
whatever, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice because you don't know when those auctions are going to occur. So you always feel a little pressure to be like, oh, I have to keep a little bit of influence in case a bid comes up. I can't just like go hog wild and just blow all my influence on
Right.
this negotiation with neutrals or something. Because what if something important comes out of the season deck next? So there had that little push pull I think is great. And I agree. I wish that TI4 had. I mean, there are good ideas in this game. I think that the sort of the seasons and like the kind of shorter rounds, like the shorter player rounds, followed by like something that happens,
Hmm.
and then sometimes a bid, and then going back to the normal play pattern. I like that loop. Like for the core loop of this game, I don't mind. Like I think that's like cool, and it keeps it a little bit fresh. The game does drag. It is very long, but I think that that's not like the fault of like that particular part of the design.
Right.
Like
That part is really solid.
I think that's really, really good. And I think in like a future 4X game, I hope to see. I mean, I guess it doesn't really make sense for like there to be like a season system and a space 4X because like the scope is so huge. But when it's just this little patch of the this fantasy world, I like the seasons both for the theme and because it kind of provides this nice like we'll all do one thing and then we move on to the next thing and
Right.
that's it.
It could work in your finance game, maybe.
Hey, that's
You
true.
know, like
Yeah,
that could be like a yeah.
the classic fall bull run. It's something I think about. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But there is a lot of random stuff that can come out of the season deck, and I do think that the long winter is maybe like the worst.
It's
I
it's anti-fun,
yeah,
you know?
it's so bad that like oh man, like I would almost want to pull it out of the deck because I don't think it
Yeah.
like you have to like think is like okay, is this card contributing to the play experience for anybody? And I think
Hmm.
the answer with that card is no. Like it's like
I
Pilfering
I
Beam in
agree.
Last
I
Light.
think it's no.
Like it's like Pilfering Beam. It's like okay, like this is just a design
Hmm.
mistake. Just take it out. Like it's that easy.
It's a
Don't
little
don't
too
The other one that
painful.
frustrates me the
Yeah.
most are in the fall where it forces you to harvest, you know? Like I hate the variance on that because then it's like, oh, if that comes out, it'll have been a completely wasted harvest on my part. And I really think that the only reason that that is there is because the uh the resource system where you're not ticking down your resources to pay for things is fundamentally flawed. And so they've had to put something in where it's like you can't just stay up at your like top level resources after you've lost all these places.
yeah,
Eventually you're going to be forced to
I
harvest, you
agree.
know?
Yeah, I think that feels like something that may have been added in like late play testing because
Yeah.
people were abusing like taking a bunch of like being very expansionist and harvesting immediately and then just like piecing for the rest of the game
Right,
being
never
like
needing it
it's like
again.
whatever
Yeah.
man, I'm at 8 on all the dials, like I don't care about this anymore. Why
Right.
would I ever harvest again? And so they had to introduce an element there. I agree that it's like creating a problem and then also having to sell the
But
solution in the
but
same
ev
thing.
even when you're not in a place where that is like problematic for the way people are playing, sometimes you harvested in the summer and then that comes out and you go, ah, one of my four actions this like
Yeah, I mean
larger
that
game round
happened
is
to me.
completely wasted.
I think
Yeah.
that happened to me like once or twice in the last play, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, great. It's
Right.
just
It's annoying and it's like, there's stuff like that. I also don't love, and I will have to talk about this sort of as a separate thing, but the whole deal with the summer is like the questing phase, and the
Yeah.
heroes are a little bit bunk. That's sort of a separate thing.
we can
I
talk
wanted to
about it.
mention about the influence tie breaking stuff
Oh,
that
right,
is
right, yeah.
particularly
Mhm.
confusing. There's a lot of ways that you tie break initiative in this game, or tie break in general. There's one of them that's kind of obvious. We have the whole fun bidding thing, like maybe about 50 to 75% of the bids are going to say Wizards Council at the top. And you have these three neat little cards that you can acquire, and there's like sort of a, cumulative like growing price to acquire them from the other players that relate to one of your strategy cards, one of your action cards.
Acquire
And one of
power.
them, what's that?
Acquire power, right?
Yeah, Acquire Power is the name of it. It's the seven. And one of them, one of these three like little titles that you can get, let's call them, allows you to break ties and decide, not even just break ties. It's not just if you tie, but you get to decide the winner of ties on Wizards Council bids, which is pretty big. It's bigger than you might think. Um, Short of that, most of the tie breaks are very confusing. And there's some tie breaks that I don't think are even really specified as far as I can tell. Um, so, for example, initiative is really important in this game. Who's going to go first? Well, the first step for deciding initiative is the number on the card that you played. But again, we've already said that you're very often playing, the similar or the same cards in the same phases. And so very often, both people are going to play their two card. And then you say, well, what's the tie break? Well, if it's the first round of that game, then you don't have the option to break the tie by looking at the number on your last played card, which is normally, the tie break. Or is it influence first? See, I don't even really know. It's confusing. At some point, you even look at what was your starting influence, which
That's the
is kind
final.
of a weird thing.
But
There's
then
all these
what if
different
that's
steps to look
tied?
at. The starting influence is never
Oh,
tied because
it's
it's
never
four,
tied.
three, two, and one for the
Oh,
fourth
okay.
actions.
Oh, okay,
Um,
perfect. Okay, well, that's at least a final tie break.
but it's weird, the tie breaking is very weird. I felt we were constantly in the rules, even just about that, of like who gets to go here. And there were once or twice where I think we just said, so you go ahead. Like we don't know.
Yeah, well, I think
Um,
it's not even like you're not even obligated to go first. It's like you get to decide.
yeah, yeah.
So, like, there's also plenty of times where it was like, well, who gets to choose? And then it's like, I don't know, do you want to go first? I guess I'm gonna go first. I don't know.
And I felt we got it most of the way down, but yeah, there was still a bit of that, and it is truly confusing. I believe Will and I had a play of this at one point where we could not find the rule on what broke, ties if you had the same amount of influence. And so the only thing we saw that broke ties was the card that
Wizard that
did the
council
Wizards
thing.
Council tie
Yeah.
breaks. And so we're like, we guess that guy gets it. and that card became absolutely busted. It's not how you're supposed to play it, but it is a confusing system, and initiative is very important. Is I think that there's a cleaner way to do it other than basing it on you know, how much influence you have or, you know, what the last card you played was. I really think that we need like a rotating first player token to break initiative ties, and that would just be simpler
Yeah.
and better, I think.
We haven't even talked about how you win the game with the titular runes in the Rune War,
Yeah,
which
Yep.
like are also kind of a little weird. We had some trouble figuring out how runes were supposed to work. Because like at first we like there's some when you set up the game, you put a blank rune and a regular rune on the map somewhere in the middle away from people's home system so people have a reason to go out. So there's a chance that you go to a place and wimp womp, it doesn't
right. Because
have
the backs
a
of them are
real
the
rune.
same. They're both
Yeah,
rune tokens. It's just one of them is a fake dragon rune and one of them is a dragon rune, but they're both rune
yeah.
tokens.
So like you might get to a place and it's like, oh, it's not a real rune. There's something interesting there of like, you can be bluffing and being like, oh yeah. Like I was thinking near the end of the game, like it would have been kind of funny if I had like swapped a real rune into the middle and like where obviously I wouldn't normally, just
Right.
to like have people be like, oh, obviously he took the rune that was there, you know just like as a mind game. But like I think most of the time you just end up collecting the runes toward your like home system where you best can
Yeah.
defend them. There's no
Especially
way,
because it is
yeah.
hard to attack multiple times in one turn, and you
Yeah.
can't move through people's units, even with flying units, we discovered. And
Yeah, which
so,
is
yeah,
which
you
is
can
which
truly
is
bunker up.
You
yeah.
can turtle a little bit.
It's worth
Yeah.
mentioning also that when the game tells you to receive a dragon rune, you do not receive a dragon rune. You first
Right.
discard up to two fake runes, then you receive a real dragon rune and a fake dragon and a false dragon rune, and then you put those two, the
Right.
real and the fake, down where you want. And so there's
Yeah.
this whole paragraph of text that's actually what happens when you receive a dragon
Yeah.
rune.
Yeah.
Which
You
is
could
particularly confusing because, again, the actual token itself, whether it's a fake and they're dragon stones, right? Whether it's a fake dragon stone or a real dragon stone, the token itself is called a dragon rune. And then they have it on cards and it says receive a dragon rune. So it's
yeah.
like, I guess I get a random one,
Yeah,
But yeah, there's a
receive
whole paragraph of what you're supposed to do. There's a
yeah,
procedure.
receive a dragon rune should just be like in bold and say do the dragon rune shuffle.
Yeah, or
Like
like there
it's
should
a
be a
whole little
little like
dance thing you need to do.
yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
receive a dragon rune star, see, page 37 or whatever it
right.
Right.
was in the rule book. But
Right. Right.
yeah, I mean, I get why they didn't want
It,
to do that, but it is a little confusing at first, for sure.
yeah. Yeah, and like I don't hate the system after we discovered what you're actually supposed to do, which is like, oh, you can discard some blanks and then you have a fake one and a real one, and you can put those down. Probably you're just putting, but again, it feels like a choice that doesn't have much of like it could have an impact, right? But I feel like it's easy enough to turtle that you're most of the time just going to be putting it as close to your home as possible so that you can defend it. Like there's
Right.
something interesting where it's like, well, maybe I could put it in this tile where I don't have jack shit, and people won't expect that I will have a dragon rune there. They'll think it's a blank,
Yeah,
you
I think
know?
I think the bluffing is definitely a miss. This isn't like Battle for Rakugan where like using your bluff token like might force somebody to assume you're doing something. In this game, it's like, okay, I'm gonna put this token in the middle. People are gonna be like, okay, well, like that's a blank.
Right.
And like if it isn't a blank, like it doesn't make any difference because like if they assumed it was a blank, then they won't go there. But it like if it is a blank, I mean, sorry, if it is a blank, they won't go there. But like even if it wasn't a blank, like you could have put it somewhere where it was safe anyway because it's
Hmm.
so hard to get
Right.
around. So like what was the point of putting the real one there? Like
Yeah.
Also,
it's just like it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
yeah, also because you can't like move through people's units, there's not really a reason like you don't control the rune unless you have a guy there. So
Right.
like somebody might attack you just because you're clogging up the board anyway, you know? Like they might
Absolutely.
be needing to go through. So like it's a bad
Yeah,
strategy
and then they'll
anyway
look
to
and they'll
put
go, "Oh,
like,
that was a real one? What do you
yeah, what the
mean?" You
fuck?
know?
Yeah, like,
I think very important to mention with this is like there aren't enough dragon runes coming out to make the
Yes.
bluff interesting, I think is kind of the key thing.
That's
Because
the big problem,
if
yeah.
if you got to the threshold where it's like I've filled up my home system and the couple of tiles that I can hold outside of that, now I have a really interesting choice of two slightly less defensible, locations where I need to put one a fake one and a real one, and maybe I'm going to pose some sort of, mock defense on the fake one and a comparable defense on the real one. Okay, now it's kind of interesting. That might happen once or twice a game. And at that point, are we really like letting the game be decided on a 50-50 bluff after you've played for 5 hours? Like that's ridiculous, you know? And that wasn't what ended up happening with our game because I was the only one that was in a position to make such a bluff, and I was so far ahead that it didn't even matter. Um, I don't think there are enough dragon runes coming out. I also think that Last Light does a little bit of a better job in terms of like VP on the board being sort of collected throughout the game or like being earned throughout the game. It's not really collected in Last Light, but you still have the same incentive to get onto the board. And in Last Light, it's actually to get more into the middle of the board, and which forces more combats, which I like. Um, but there are spaces on the board worth points in the same way that there are here in Rune Wars.
Yeah,
But you
maybe
collect those points throughout the game instead of having to hold them the whole game.
yeah, maybe there should be a rune monolith in the center of the board that has its own mini, and like if you hold it for a full year, you get a dragon rune. And crucially, like you have to place it. And so in so doing, you're beginning to whoever is holding it is beginning to clog up the board with these things and just accelerating.
Right.
I think pretty much the ways that dragon runes are generated are kind of opaque and like it doesn't really it's just there's not enough of them. I
I'll say here, I don't like the way that the it generates off of heroes. The heroes get fun equipment to duel with other heroes, and then the way you get a dragon rune off of that is by discarding all of your fun equipment. Like
yeah,
you have to discard all the fun things that you went and quested for to get a victory point, and then the heroes are kind of like just jerking off and they're doing nothing
Right.
anymore. And you're kind of like, I don't give a shit about them anymore. I don't care. I lost all of my heroes at a certain point, and then like I had an opportunity where I might have been able to hire another one, and I didn't feel worse off for it. You know?
Oh yeah, we got about halfway through the game and I felt that heroes were no longer important. And I do want to touch on all of that because the hero mechanic is quite a saga, that whole thing. Heroes, heroes, heroes. And you can't live with them and you can't live without them. But you could live without them in the way that they currently are. You know
uh,
what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree and understand.
I
Here's
think,
the thing about the heroes.
yeah.
They matter as long as you have quests. Here's the thing about the quests. The quests are not as good to get from your cities as the other options. And that's the only way to get quests is through your cities. And you might not even have cities, you know? There needs to be more ways to get quests so that your heroes can stay relevant, and there just aren't. I would rather get two action cards. If it's only one action card on the city, then you probably get to get three influence or something. You know, I'm not. Maybe you get two neutral units. I'm not taking the quest over these other options. That's just me.
The option I had was between two quests, which was the best quest generation on the board before that city was burned into ash and ruin. And the other option was three influence, which was arguably way better than two
Yeah.
quests.
Well, think about the
Um,
quest, right? You get the quest. Does it give you anything immediately? No. Does it give you, the ability to eventually get something? Sure, but it's like I'm gonna see if I can do the quests, which you might not be able to. It might be that it's on the complete other side of the board and you have to go through, like five armies to be able to even, work on it. And then maybe your hero's just getting killed when he's out there because I guess your hero can move through things, but nonetheless you might not even be able to do the quest. And then even once you do, you might get an absolute dog shit item, you know? Now, you might get a banger, but I'd rather take the
Well,
guaranteed.
the thing
Also, yeah,
the
go
thing
ahead.
is you need to okay, so you need to do the quest to get the item, but you need three items and the title to be able to get one dragon rune on the board.
Right.
And there's going to be a bidding war for that title because it's one of the like actual it's like one of the only consistent ways to even generate a dragon rune at
Yeah.
all. So like you're looking at the city and it's like I need quests to get the items, but I need influence to bid on the title. So it's like you're
And I didn't even mention the step of the hero might not even get to do the quest properly. They might fail, you know?
yes, they
That's the
could
other thing.
also fail.
They could fail. Also, you could have somebody just come over and murder them. Like, and then they get all of the items that you worked to quest for.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
The
like,
the initiative order on the summer round matters quite a bit even, you know?
yeah.
It does. It definitely does.
I'd rather go later in the summer round. Or yeah, later.
Yeah, depends. Sometimes you want to get the F out of Dodge. Maybe you can like
Yeah.
dodge getting attacked. But like, I don't know, if someone wants your hero's, bones, it doesn't really matter how many good items they have. Like they're probably gonna get it. Like
Yeah.
they're
If
probably
they
gonna
throw
get
enough
lucky
at it,
enough.
they can probably
Yeah.
get it.
And that ties back into my other problem is like, dueling other heroes is only good so that you can get their items and then sacrifice all of those items. And the items are the things that make you good at dueling other heroes. Um, and so at a certain point, like if all of the items have been sacked for dragon runes, your heroes suck, no one has any quests. You don't care about the heroes. They don't do anything else. They do one minor thing, which is if you have circle units, they can let you draw an extra card when you would resolve your circle unit stuff and then pick the cards that you want. They don't even give
Yeah.
you an extra card.
Yeah,
It's
you still have to
just
discard one.
you
Yeah.
just get still have to discard one, but you get like more of a
Which, to
choice.
be fair, is often as good as drawing another card because you probably are going to have one that's a miss. Because
Yes,
there
I
are a
th
lot of misses in this
that
game.
ability
Yeah.
is real. Honestly, it's probably one of the more useful things they can do later in the game for like an important battle, especially because circle units are usually a unit where you're looking for the special ability and just the ability to look for it is useful.
Unless
However,
you didn't have circle units like
unless
me.
you have no circle
Right.
units, what were they
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah.
It is quite strange. I think that this is kind of like the core issue with the game for me. I think it's like well, it ties back into what we were just talking about. It's like the low generation of dragon runes is also tied to the low generation rate of quests, or even we could say the low completion rate and generation of quests, relative to the length of the game. And I feel like there should be passive dragon rune income either via some like King of the Hill mechanic, like I was joking, but not actually
Yeah.
joking about like something in the middle of the board, kind of like Last Light, like a monolith that generates runes if you hold it for a year or something. Plus, I think you should just be getting maybe at the beginning of every summer, you just get a quest. And you
Yeah.
can use cities to get more quests, but like you should just at least once per game year, you should get a quest. I mean,
Yeah.
that
I
should just be
absolutely agree. I think that would
that's
be such an easy change to make to
yeah.
improve the game.
I mean, that is
My
a mega easy
yeah.
house rule to do. Like, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
One of my core issues with the way that it currently works right now, too, is if somebody has the Chad, like, skull guy who's really good at dueling heroes, the optimal play, like the optimal strategy might be like, I'm just not going to do my quests. You know? Like it
Right, because
might
you don't
just
want
be
to get
like,
units that are going to get snagged by the enemy.
yeah, you might just be like, well, I'm just not going to do that quest. I'm just going to like sit on these quests and never do them so that more items don't enter the larger item economy and get turned into like victory points
Yeah.
for my opponent.
That was largely how I won, was one good turn where I killed both Will and Ben's heroes, got their items, and in the same turn acquired power and got the option to cash in items for runestones. And one of the items that I stole was also worth a runestone, essentially. And so it was like a two runestone play. And that was kind of enough throughout the game. Like you get so few runestones that the 2 runestone play, I think, was enough to put me
Two
ahead.
two runes is huge in this game.
Yeah.
That's like a huge amount of work. And
And then it was like 3 turns, maybe 2 turns of you guys trying to stop me, and movement is just so slow. And like battles are so slow that even with the both of you, like you're almost in each other's way, trying like stumbling over each other, trying to get into my,
yeah,
stronghold.
Yeah,
I'd
I
say
remember we almost had an exciting end to the game, and then you drew the action card that locked me down from being able to go and attack you to let Will attack you with his army. It was like we almost had it, and then it was like, oh, he played the action card
Yeah,
that
you couldn't
ruined our
even get
entire
out of Will's
plan.
way because I had
Yeah.
a single action card.
well, because flying and fast, okay, fast is better than flying, first of all, but flying should be better than what it currently is. Because, like, most of the time, especially in late game, there's going to be stuff on every tile, like on every hex of the board. So, like, what good is the ability to move three or to fly over boundaries if every tile has guys on it that you can't move through,
I
even if you're
I
flying?
will say I personally do think flying is better than fast because so often the tiles will be bogged down. But that is coming from a place of having played the elves where I could get an army of 4 Pegasus units, and that might be enough to surprise someone and still win a battle on, the tile right after a
That
mountain or
could,
something.
but I mean more like I think
For
that
for most people, they're
flying
not going to have, 4 flying units.
that's also true, but I think I'm thinking more along the lines of like there's no ability to deep strike. It's like the opposite of Clash of Cultures where like everybody's getting deep striked. Like
Right.
there's
With
there's
the
there are
ships.
there are only deep strikes in Clash of Cultures and there's no other type of strike. You're either just coming in from the sea or you're very slowly ambling on the land in that game. In this game, there's only one option, which is going real slow. And the ability to go over boundaries that are normally impassable, like mountains and water, is nice, but most of the time, what would be more relevant is something that would be equivalent to like TI4 lightwave deflectors and the ability to be like, okay, I'm going to move through this unit into like some crucial region that has a dragon rune that is undefended. Like there's just one guy there. That kind of gameplay seems like interesting because it's like, okay, well, now maybe I don't put all my dragon runes at the back of my empire because they could go there and just take it with my one guy guarding it. Maybe the dragon runes I put down are going to change with where my armies are. Like it kind of goes back to the mechanic of being able to move the dragon runes and the idea of like maybe the armies are kind of carrying them around or something
Mm,
rather than it being
yeah.
like, okay, just throw it in the back. Nobody can get there anyway. It doesn't matter? So I think
Yeah.
the movement, the inability to deep strike combines with the way the dragon runes are on the board to sort of create this turtling problem, I think. Or
Yeah.
like,
And
yeah,
it is a problem, yeah. And I my only nervousness around that idea is as it relates to the mechanic of strongholds getting captured rather than destroyed, because you capture someone's stronghold deep, you can just instantly start, building there the next round potentially, which could be a bit strong. But it's more like the game is not set up in such a way to uh deal with this turtling problem. It seems like it's actually encouraged a turtling issue.
Yeah. I will say I think holistically is like my main issue with this game is that like almost every element I have like just a minor gripe with. Like
Mm,
it feels like it feels like every like single part of it has something that I like I can bitch about a little bit. Where it's like, the heroes, the action system, moving on the board, the like resource generation's a little weird, and it has like some stuff I don't like that interacts with this. Like, I don't know. There's just like and it's not like anything, there's not like any one part of the game that is like, oh, this ruins it for me. It's like, it's all of these things working to get like working together and maybe sometimes even in spite of each other. There's just some like oil that needs to be poured over this mechanism
maybe
because
even
currently it's grinding,
maybe
like,
maybe maybe even boiling oil in some cases. I think that I will say though that I think the combat in this game is pretty close to being where you want it to be, you know? Like
Hmm.
kind of top to bottom. And as we said earlier, like the card system is not really ideal, but maybe with like specialized dice, you could kind of get through this more easily. But I like that the combat is kind of like, everybody's units have got something cool going on, and the units are a little bit asymmetrical between the different factions. But the combat doesn't drag out too long because you're just kind of going top to bottom. I think I'm pretty happy with the combat like as is. A lot of the problems result from it being a deck and not dice. Like if I were to have a gripe with the combat, it's because of that like the ability to have these streaks where it's like, okay, I guess there's just 10 cards in the deck after the shuffle that all are blank for this class. And
Yeah,
like it's almost less likely for that to happen with dice, I think, for there to be these.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. No one is actually sitting there and doing, seven riffle shuffles to get a true random deck, right?
Yeah.
There is an amount of, yeah. Hmm.
So that can definitely happen. Like in my own case, like my hexagons, despite allegedly being the strongest units with the highest hit rate, they barely hit at all until a battle very close to the end of the game, which turned out not to matter at all.
Right.
But
yeah,
otherwise, they were whiffing constantly. And like, even if I look at the distribution of the deck, this is like the equivalent of like War Suns whiffing or something. It'd be like, oh yeah, I'm coming
Right.
in with my War Sun. Oh, I guess I just didn't roll above a 3 on any of these
Right.
dice.
Yeah.
It's like,
There's
what?
plenty of misses on the hexagon units, which are
It's like
supposed to be the strongest ones.
it
And
felt that
right.
feels kind of
mind you,
weird.
they still only have one strength in determining like after battle victor. And so
Yes.
if they just miss and then you're like down one strength, you might have to fully retreat and be like totally boned, which feels terrible, when your big cool unit misses. And it happens. It happens a ton in this.
Yeah. Well, and every piece of plastic only has one die, or one
Mhm.
draw,
Roll. Yeah,
really.
one draw. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
want to bring up, we've made the comparison between Runewars and Eclipse. Or not Eclipse, I'm sorry, Last
Last
Light.
light.
I got two other comparisons for you guys. That because yeah, there is a lot of good stuff in this game. I do think the design is a little bit dated, and I want to give these three games that I think have a lot in common with this, but do it better. One of them is Last Light. Dwellings of Eldervale, which I see a lot of similarities in terms of, okay, you're coming in with, your different unit classes, and those have some interesting abilities on them. Although in Dwellings, they kind of simplify and you'll just have two units with, interesting class abilities. But I do think that that game accomplishes a lot of the same stuff. And then Uprising as well. Uprising, what is it called? Uprising Rise of the
Curse
Emperor?
of the Last Emperor, I
Curse of the
believe.
Last Emperor. I think that in terms of the combat system is doing something very similar. And I would rather play any of those games than this. There's still things about this I like. But yeah, I guess the reason I bring that up in those comparisons is just to say that there are interesting things here, and I do think it's worth complimenting them. But ultimately, like Ben has pointed out, there's enough like wrong with this, enough off with this that is it really a complete package, Rune Wars? Hmm. I
yeah.
I would say no.
I'll say also about Rune Wars, they have a cool hero system and cool quest system that works really well. If that's like one of your selling points for like, oh, it's like a
Yeah.
fantasy thing and like,
I
the
I do
heroes thing
think
sounds
adding,
cool.
one quest every summer or something would be a good idea though.
Yeah.
I think oh
Yeah.
sorry, go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say last week when we talked about Clash of Cultures, I think it was like, well, this is kind of like a board game version of Civilization. This game feels really close to being like trying to be a board game version of like Heroes of Might and Magic. Here's My Magic 3, of course, a famous classic game, but if you're younger, maybe you remember 5, or I guess I don't, the franchise isn't that big anymore, but certainly back then in the 2010s, people would have been thinking about it. The people who designed this game would have had it in mind. It's kind of an iconic game of the 90s. And similarly, it had like you had armies marching around, but you also had heroes that were able to kind of do things on their own a little bit. Heroes are much more impactful in combat in that game, as everyone who played that game will know, because they can like cast spells in combat.
Hmm.
Um, so it does feel kind of weird because in this game, the heroes do feel like a totally different system tacked on to what would otherwise be like a decently competent 4X game. Because like if you take heroes out and you have some other method of generating dragon runes, what have you lost really? You know?
Mm,
Like it doesn't feel like they need to be in the game. And except as that kind of to get that Heroes of Might and Magic feeling where you have these guys marching around and doing their own thing and being, getting equipment and whatnot. But it doesn't really like I don't as Ben said, I don't have any issues with like the heroes or the quests mechanically. It's just the fact that they're in this game and they're not really like gelling that well, I think. And you'd probably shave like an hour off the playtime without heroes in the game, maybe more. Summer always takes forever in this game in the early
Yeah.
turns, I think.
Yeah, it's
it
like
does.
I want it to like it's missing some of that elegance that I desire where like a lot of these subsystems don't seem to be jiving with each other. I again like I think you could shave a lot of time out and a lot of fiddliness out by like removing heroes and replacing the stuff with dice. I don't know if the game that you're left with has the same like quirks that you kind of want it to. I don't know if it's like if it's what it is, but I think that it would be more cohesive. Um yeah. It would also remove like two phases from like summer and fall, and maybe you have to like replace that with something else. But it does feel like there's some parts in this game that are doing like one thing when I want them to do more than one thing. Um, you know,
Yeah. Well, to be fair, summer could just be the cards that are already there without also having the hero quest phase, because it does still have a card like event for the summer. And now some of
yeah,
them do interact with the hero quest phase, but there's still something there. There's nothing wrong with having like a more neutrally phased, let's say, where, there isn't, oh, we're checking your food like winter does, or, we're picking up your action cards like spring does.
yeah. Maybe summer is just the season of all good events. We all know that
Yeah,
summer is just a party, and all of the events in there are going to be something good for somebody.
right.
Yeah,
Summer could be the event that like where they check if somebody's holding the rune monolith and a dragon rune is
Right.
generated. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's
yeah.
easy to find something for that.
I do think that I would like this game better without Dragonstones being on the board and instead being like a permanent resource for you. Maybe you could have some temporary amount of them that stay on the board and that you have to fight over.
Yeah, well, the
I would
commit
rather
situ
that
yeah.
you earn some of them by virtue of fighting rather than like, having this incentive just to like hold on to all the ones that you have and maybe you expand because you're looking you think you have got a good read on somebody, but it's so hard to get into enemy turf in this.
Um, again, the Komet singularity, like you're describing, like,
Yeah,
I want to get VP for battling, and also there's some on the board that are temporary that you fight over. And it's like, yeah, it's a good system. Like that
yeah,
works. I
it's
like the
true.
way that works. Like,
It could have been Kabet.
it could have
Ah,
been Komet.
what did they
It's
do?
as I
Yeah.
always say, it's the commit singularity problem. It's like as area control games tend towards an optimal solution, they will draw closer to commit.
Yeah.
They didn't have that technology in 2010 though. I
Yeah,
mean, Komet
that
wasn't till
is
12 12.
true. That is true. Commit had not come out yet. Well, are you boys feeling like we could go to ratings, or is there anything else you're feeling?
Yeah, I think I've got mine in my brain.
Yep. Ready.
I think I went last time, so it's only fair that I go first this time, unless either of you gents would prefer to go first.
Be my guest, Will.
Go ahead.
I think I'm coming in with that 6.5 here. Um, I think there's a lot of mechanics here that, as Ben has as eloquently put, are mechanics that I like mostly like, but there's one like problem with them that's just I can't ignore it. It just kind of bites at me. And so what you end up with is this sum of like a bunch of mechanics that I almost really like, but that come together to sort of make a playing experience that's a little bit like it's like sandpaper that's like kind of grinding away at your play of the game. Like when we play Clash of Cultures, and again, I like Clash more than you guys. I think just because maybe because of the theme, I did not feel the time going by as keenly as with this game. With this game, I could feel the grind really happening as hour after hour went by. And even though there are elements of this game that I do really like I think the core phases of the game, like there being like the seasons of the game being sort of how we progress through the game round and the sort of card selection system, if not for the minor problems like the supremacy bonus on the card selection and the seasons having some weird effects sometimes, these are systems that I think are the could be the core of a really great game that would be like 8 plus. And with all the edges and rough parts of the game sanded off or boiling oiled off. And so I think 6.5 is fair from my perspective here. I would not rather play this game than most other 4X games, I think, but I do think that there's some good ideas here. Um, that hopefully there's a Runewars revised edition in the 2030s, and
Maybe they'll
just
name it Battle Mist again. It'll like
that
flop back.
it'll be Battle Mist 2, and
Yeah.
it'll be the definitive Fantasy 4X. Who knows? But that's me.
Would you
Yeah.
like to go, Ben?
Sure. This game is out of print, and you would have a hard time tracking it down. And it's probably not worth trying to track it down, in my opinion. I'm going to give this one a 4, which might be a little bit harsh, but I do think that there's a lot that I don't like, and I don't think I would want to play this one again over most games. Like I'd rather play Arcs or Eclipse again over this, just because like I feel like even if I don't like those games, they feel a little bit more polished, I guess. Like this one has some charm to it. Like there's some character here that I enjoy. Um, but the amount of like the amount of grinding against my like against my brain that this does is not very like fun for me. Like I was physically trying to remind myself like, okay, go for the points. It's a game about points. I need to go for the points. How am I getting points? Like I had to keep coming back to that several times in my brain while I was playing it and just getting distracted with like some of the other stuff. I feel like I had a million questions. I kept having Will go and like look up an exception to like a rule that I was asking. I don't know. It did not feel like I was able to intuit like very well like how is this game meant to be played? And a lot of the conclusions I've come to as to like, well, what does like actually solving this kind of puzzle, like what is actually like optimally trying to play look like? I think I don't like the things that I'm coming up to. I don't like the idea that like like I should be playing this like blackjack, or like I should be, you know, like like doing it the way that like it's intended. Like I don't know if the intended form of play is like is fun, and I don't know if the like side objectives and the things that I was doing on my own like gelled really well with that. I had some fun like questing and stuff, and then it kind of just felt a little disappointing in the end when it was like, oh, I finally like assembled the items to maybe like turn this into a quest, and then it was like, all right, kill him.
Yeah, he's got what we need.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wait, so will you repeat one time the score you landed on for me?
4.
A 4. Okay. That's what I thought you had said, but
I'm going to self-correct really quickly. I'm going to go to a 6. I
instead of
was
six
check
five.
I was checking. Fractal is my only 6.5 I've given, and I think I'd rather play Fractal than this game, so I will go to a 6.
Yeah.
That's my new
Yeah.
system, is I have to think like, do I want to play this game as much or more or less than like that rating?
I
And
don't I don't look at the spreadsheet you guys have made. I'm going completely off of vibes. Out
I
absolutely off of the cuff.
I'm vibeless. I've been told this many times, and I like to sort of now that we actually have a body of data, I like thinking about like, well, Like, would I rather play this than such and such? So I think I would rather play Fractals. So I think I'll go 6 here. Sorry.
That's
No,
fair
you're good.
enough. I need to continue to update that spreadsheet, but I don't remember what account I have the original spreadsheet under, so I'll have to figure that out. But I think those are both fair ratings, and I think those are fair points brought up. I'm in the middle there. I would go a 5 on Rune Wars. I'm not um super excited to play this one again by any means. I'm impressed with some of the mechanics. I'm definitely unimpressed with a lot more of the game than that, though. It seems to me like the type of thing where if you had four relatively like inexperienced board gamers come together and they really wanted to, sit down and learn the rules to this and maybe, try to really explore the strategy and exploit the game as much as possible, they might have a fun go of that for a while. But if you're coming at this game with much of background in these, strategic dudes on a map style games, I think that you're going to be annoyed with it. And um, I also wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a starting point anyways. I would rather
No,
you
no,
play
that's
Inish or
true.
something.
Yeah.
No.
But I'm saying like, I think back to when I was in college the first time I played Twilight Imperium and how it felt approaching that where it was like, oh my God, there's so much here and there's so much to explore. And oh, what does my faction even do? And we're gonna sit down and have like this, massive, amazing game, and it's gonna be, this huge, expansive thing. And sort of the fascination with it there. And, I'm not saying that there's not anything underneath Twilight Imperium because there is a good game there. But sort of the fascination for me at first was just that we're going to have this big epic experience. And I think Rune Wars will do that for you once or twice. I just think there are better options ultimately. So I don't know if that makes sense. You might have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
I will say, I think that Rune Wars on the box markets itself as a game of war and diplomacy. And I will say I find the diplomacy in this game
We
lacking.
didn't
I
really
don't
talk
think,
about it, but yeah,
yeah,
there's no trading or diplomacy except on just a handful of action cards, really.
Mm, yeah,
yeah, like completely the opposite of Clash of Cultures. Similar result, because Clash of Cultures you don't really end up trading hardly at all, I don't think. But like, I don't think you can trade anything. There's like some action cards where like you have to benefit another player in
yeah,
addition to yourself. But really, you're just kind of doing it. You're kind of like, well, who will hurt me the least with this, I guess.
hmm
I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is such a maximalist design. It was like there was no one, well, either there was no one or there was no one, either there was no one at all or no one who wanted to say like, hey, maybe we should not add this mechanic into the game.
Yeah.
And
right,
I want to see like I already said I think the game would be cleaner and like would run better without heroes at all, and there just being like a more integrated way to generate dragon runes on the board. But then even like I think that would kind of create this design space for there to be like more influence stuff. Maybe expand the diplomacy, have like the diplomatic stuff come from influence tokens. Uh, and have more bids and because the bidding of this game is so much fun, like there's like that, right, give me more of that. It's more
right.
fun than the TI agenda phase when those sorts of things come up and there's like a big bid that's going on. um yeah, TI4 would be like, imagine like the turn order not mattering and the speaker not deciding things and it just being like okay, like I'm bidding X bids. That'd be
Mm,
so, I mean, but it'd be
Yeah, Speaker could still break ties too,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
would
you
be
have
more
speaker break ties,
interesting.
and then it's just like, oh, well, we don't need to talk. We don't need to be here for 30 minutes talking about it. Everyone's got an opinion. We can talk, we can negotiate in hand and say, like, hey, like, I'll vote for you, but everything will be revealed in an instant. And then when that instant occurs, you can resolve it and move on with your life. You know what I mean? There's something to be said for these blind auction
There would
systems.
be some people who would make it, into a whole freaking discussion, but I agree as a starting point. Yeah, that's way easier, way simpler, way faster resolution,
It's even if it
and
is
more
a whole
interesting.
even if it is a whole discussion, I've played TI a number of times, and the thing that sucks the most is when it's like there's a big discussion before the voting starts, then somebody votes one way, and then there's a whole nother discussion when it comes
That's
to
what
the
I
next
mean.
person's turn to
That's what I
vote.
mean. It eliminates the
Hmm.
bonus discussions. It's like
That's
Yeah,
just yeah. Oh man.
yeah.
Well, once again, I've gone a little bit higher than you guys. My damn nostalgia for old computer games is carrying me for this. Well, you guys should check out Heroes 3, and so should the viewers. If the viewers have not played Heroes of Might and Magic 3, do yourself a favor and play it because it actually does hold up. It's a freaking amazing game. To this day. In fact, I think they many times tried to recreate how good it is, but they never succeeded in making a game in that specific genre as good as Heroes 3, according to most people. How Heroes 3 does have, and for Heroes 3 got all these like fan expansions because people liked it so much. Of course, it has glaring balance issues like every good game, but who cares? You have your fun.
It's a single player
yeah.
game mostly, right? Like so
Well,
like
but
who
but back
yeah.
you could play LAN multiplayer back then, my friend. And actually, back then you could play it like a board game by doing a hot seat. If you had one
Mm.
Huh.
computer, this was back before we had the damn internet to do this stuff, but you could you'd like play your game and you'd have your fog of war, and then you'd leave the room. Someone else would come in when it was their turn, and they had their own fog of war. They couldn't see what you were doing on your end, and they'd play their turn, and then hit end turn, and then like somebody else would come in to hit the confirmation, and you could do. We actually did this on like a laptop, like an early laptop back in the day, and you could. It was kind of like like I said, it's kind of like a board game when you play it that way. Um, but yeah, very primitive compared to what we have now, of course. All right. Well, I don't have anything else to say about this game other than that to say that I am selling it.
Oh,
Oh,
shoot! He's getting
Yeah,
rid of it.
yes.
Wow.
I am selling this game. It hurts me to part with any of my out of print FFG collection, but I honestly just don't see
C
myself sell
Corey Konizia, eat your heart out, man.
yeah. I mean, even as someone who loves Rebellion and whatnot, but this game, like maybe even a six is generous. I think it's dated in all the ways we've spoken about. I don't see myself ripping it out again, and especially as we said earlier, Last Light feels like it delivers this game's experience much more quickly and dynamically.
I think
And
Last Light is the best comparison. But again, I think Dwellings, you get some of that, like, I'm
Dwellings,
capturing enemy units. I've got the fantasy theme. I think that uh, you got the different unit types that do different things. I think you got a lot there. And then again, Uprising in terms of the combat system, I think
absolutely.
is an improvement, but in the
But
same
that's what
realm.
I'm saying is I'm gonna reach for any of those three games depending on like where I'm leaning that day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a mood that I'll have where I would reach for this game over any of those three. And if I'm not going to do that, then there's no reason for the game to be in my collection, I think. So,
Yeah.
that's it. Drop the
That's it.
guillotine.
It's been
It's done.
beheaded.
It's done. So,
Now it's not Rune Wars, it's Oon Wars.
Yeah,
oh
stop it.
boy.
He's dead
Beheaded.
already. Stop it.
All right. Well, thank you for watching and making it through another long episode about an old game. If you have made it this far. Look forward to the next discussion where we may talk about another old out of print game.
Yeah,
It's
It's
possible.
possible we
we'll
talk
see.
about Clockwork Wars next, or we'll see. Yeah.
We either talk about the newest stuff or the oldest stuff.
Yeah, nothing in between.
That's right.
All right, see you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.